Welcome. We have, of course, our beautiful, beautiful Pastor Siri Strommen with us from Atonement Lutheran Church in Bloomington, Minnesota. Welcome, Siri.
Thank you. Good to be here again.
It's always wonderful to talk with you. Siri she has a beautiful heart, a very open mind, but she also has a lot of theological education. And I find that very helpful in kind of wading these waters as we're all kind of transitioning out of, not all of us, but a lot of us are transitioning out of traditional patriarchal religions and trying to follow more the callings of our heart and our soul. And Siri and I were talking for a few minutes before I started recording, and I said, Siri, let's record this. The reason I wanted to do this, I've said it many times, is and I'm still I don't want to make it sound like I've transitioned and now I know exactly who I am and where I fit in the cosmos. But when I was kind of walking away from patriarchal religions, because my soul led me there, it was not a choice. It was just new information was coming in as I sat quietly day after day, and traditional religion did not fit for me anymore. And again, I always say, if it fits for you, wonderful. Just ask yourself if you are propagating the need to get everyone to believe what you believe, because that's the problem. The problem is not if you are very comfortable in your traditional patriarchal religion, good for you. And they are patriarchal. They were all started by men, written by men. So they're patriarchal religions. So that's all. I always ask, question yourself of why you need everyone to believe what you believe, because I can tell you when I was very, very religious, it was based in fear. I needed other people to confirm what I believed and that this is the right way. And most importantly, that there was a God in the sky that approved of what I was doing, and I would be a good girl, and maybe he'd give me good things here, but if nothing else, I'd get good things after I died. So that's all kind of in there. But what Siri and I were talking about is it's so obvious to me, this, as the divine feminine is rising, the patriarchy is like, no way. Yep. I mean, with these two candidates on this other side, I tried to write down some of the things that they're saying. Of course, we know that the VP says he wants abortion to be illegal nationally. He said, single women with cat ladies are with cats are miserable. The miserable cat ladies, that's been played out in the past month. And as far as abortion after rape, he has said 2 wrongs don't make a right. So insinuating, yes, that woman should absolutely carry her rapist child to term. And I don't know if you watched any of the DNC convention, but there was a woman on there who got pregnant with her stepfather's baby. And she said something so powerful between the eyes. And she said, I do not believe a child should be forced to carry their parent's child. Think about that. Think
right?
How effed up this is. There is such a movement to get women to shut up and get back in their place. One other thing that just, I have to be really careful because I want to swear big swear. But literally during the debate where you had this intelligent, accomplished, educated, experienced woman up against this really blathering blob that was saying ridiculous stuff. 90% of it wasn't even true. But at one point, when he was talking about whether or not she was Black, because, that's an important topic you should be talking about when you're running for president, whether your opponent really identifies as Black. But, right. And he said, and she puts out. Like, he literally said that about this 59-year-old vice president, former DA, very accomplished. Look, he said, and nobody talked about it. I'm like, nobody is talking about the fact that this guy just called this woman running for president a whore on television. But this is how normalized we have made the subjugation and degradation of women. And this is the big thing that I really want to talk about, Siri, is how easy we take that cloak and wrap ourselves in it. How we feel so shitty about ourselves as it is, that it's easy for us to drink that poison. It's easy for us to take it in because that's how we feel about ourselves. And I always say, people say, how can any woman follow these guys? How can you vote? I mean, it's your own discrimination, your own annihilation if you happen to get pregnant and your aborting the fetus and a doctor doesn't want to do any surgery on you because he might have to go to jail. I mean, how can you vote against having autonomy over your own body and medical decisions? And here's the thing, because I don't want women to feel bad about themselves. I have felt terrible about myself my whole life. I've said it a million times. I went to therapy in my 20s, and the therapist was like, I never met anyone that hated themselves as much as you. And, you know, there's a lot to that. And I don't need to go into that because it doesn't really matter. But I think it's very, very easy to make women feel bad about themselves. And what I really want to make clear, Siri, is we get really down on ourselves too. I should be better. What's wrong with me? Why am I so fat? Why am I so good? Why don't I speak up? Well, there's a reason for that. And that's what we need to talk about, because we are so surrounded by false teachings, false beliefs. Religion is the core. I'm sorry. I think religion is not a great thing. And Siri, I know you're a Lutheran pastor, but hopefully, like, Siri's hanging in there. I'm not. I walked away from religion, but Siri's in there she's trying to turn that Titanic in a wonderful way. And God bless her. I love that you're doing that. It's not my jam, but I pose no judgment. I want everyone to find their own path. And I love that people who want to stick with religion have alternatives like you to follow. But kind of went off on my one of my tangents there. Oh, women hating themselves. So we are trained that from the time we're little, we are getting the message that we're responsible for the fall of humanity. This poor innocent man was just in a garden and everything was wonderful until that bitch of a woman came along and tempted him with an apple. What a made up story, but we don't know that. We don't understand that. We take it as truth. Most people, if you ask them, will say that is a true story. That actually factually happened, that a woman was tempted by the devil. And this has been ingrained in us and ingrained in us. And this is why we're responsible for our own rape, because we are temptresses. This is what we do to men. We tempt them. We lure them into sin. We are responsible for the downfall of humanity. And so if, like me, sometimes honestly, it can get, maybe discouraging is the right word, but you know, when you work at this stuff decades, years after years after years, and for myself, I'll speak for myself, there's times I'm like, oh my God, I can't, like, how is it I'm still not speaking up? How is it I'm still saying yes when I want to say no and no when I want to say yes? How is it that I'm still allowing myself to be treated in ways that well, that nobody can change that but us. That's absolutely true. But I'll tell you what's really changed things for me is giving myself a little grace, a little wiggle room, saying, Mary, you are surrounded by people, religions, institutions, society, politics, corporations that tell you you are lesser than because you are a woman. And your job here is to be demure and sweet and quiet and sexy when it's time, but only when it's time and only with that one right person, right? That's your job, to care for all the children in the world, to give birth to the children and see that as the most fulfilling job you could ever have, which isn't a bad thing, but the only job you should ever have. And that should be enough. That was one of J.D. Vance's things about how, oh no, that was that Butker guy, the football guy that was like,
oh yeah,
wife, if you ask her, the most important thing she's ever done. So as women, I think we need to look at things, step back from a broader perspective. Don't be so hard on ourselves, because we are surrounded by this. And this political season, if that's what it's called, it's insane. This is not normal. None of this is normal, with politicians getting up there and talking horribly about women, talking about the female candidate, that she's a whore, that she slept her way to the top, the Joe and the hoe. People proudly, I mean, I see it on cars, like children are seeing that it's like the age-old playbook. She's a whore. She's a whore. She's a whore. She should not be trusted with her sexuality. She should not be trusted to make decisions regarding any children that come from her own sexuality. It's a degradation of women. It's an infantilizing of women. And that's how we actually were legally viewed and in society for a long time. That is why we take our husband's last name, because we were their property. That is why we have our father's last name. We were their property until he gave us away to another man. His property was given to another man. Now we are his property, so we take his name. So we are carrying this all on our backs. So let's not be so hard on ourselves for trying to wiggle out from under this weighted blanket of patriarchy. And let's give ourselves some credit for who we're waking up. We're waking up. But we need each other. We need each other, because all these great movements in history did not come because the people in power one day woke up and said, no, this isn't fair. We ought to give them more rights.
Yeah, never.
Never.
Never has that happened.
Yes. It's always the people saying, I've had enough of this. I deserve better than this. And doing it together. And I kind of think that's where we're at. So, Siri, take it away. Whatever your thoughts are on this, I'm happy to hear them.
Yeah, as you were talking, one of the things that came to me was that it isn't just us and our lifetime that we are working out as women. We have within our genes, within our past, we have generations of women who've been told to shut up and sit down and be quiet, and had their, men's boots on their necks for thousands of years, for so many generations. And so all of that is in our bodies. It's in our genes to have this. And so as we are slowly, painfully taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back with discovering our own freedom, religious and otherwise, we're healing a lineage behind us, but that's not something that can be done overnight. And also, every little step we take has massive ramifications for those behind us, for those beside us, and for those who will come. So we may not say no every single time that we wish we would have. But if we said no a few times when we normally would have complied, that's starting to find our power. And so I want us to be able to sort of look and see how far we've come. Like, are you different in the way you react to things now from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and so on and so forth? What have you learned about yourself? Where have you found courage and found power? One of the big things, one of my life lessons that I am here to figure out is how to not give a shit what anyone thinks about me. I'm 47 years old and I'm still working on this, but this drove the first half of my life significantly, like in a massive, massive way. And I have been slowly, being mindful and intentional about discovering who I am, what my way is, and realizing that that's what God wants for me. That nobody can tell me what I'm supposed to do but me and spirit, right? That's it. And I'm slowly learning the lessons to not get triggered when people show me that they don't like me or disagree with me. And one of the ways that that's happening is like, I have a YouTube channel as well, and I put out teachings, and every once in a while, one of my videos will kind of catch a certain group of people who get really kind of triggered by what I say because I'm too open-minded, or just I'm a woman pastor. I mean, I've had people probably not even watch the video and they just comment, women cannot be pastors. And to me, they're so threatened by my existence, by the fact that I get to wear a collar, and that threatens their notion that men are on top, that men get to determine the world, that men are gatekeepers of God and the Bible and the church and every goddamn thing on the planet, and that a woman dares to say that she has access and the right to preach and teach. And then they go after the 2 same stupid verses in it's fifth grade biblical understanding. It is childish biblical understanding. I'm going on a little mini rant here because I recently put up The video I put up recently was why women should be pastors. And I was waiting for it. I was like, here come the misogynists. And I'm waiting for any articulate conversation, but there is none. So one guy just puts exactly what I said not to do in the first 2 minutes of the video. I said, do not put down the same 2 damn verses that every woman has heard the entire life for the last 2,000 years to tell them to shut up and sit down. Like, have a little bit more imagination than that if you want to actually have a conversation. But no, this guy puts down, 1 Timothy verse 2. And I responded, I'm like, you did exactly what I said not to do. You didn't even watch the video, did you? I was like, because in the video, I made it very, very clear that every single interaction Jesus has with a woman is mind-blowingly radical, feminist, and liberal for anything that would have been expected of a man at that time. 4 entire gospels worth of Jesus being a radical feminist, and you pick 2 verses that are written by Paul to completely push all of that aside. What the hell is wrong with you? Like, it's so, people have been so brainwashed. And the fact that men believe that because they were born in the body that they were, that they have a divine right to tell women what to do who were born in the body that they were. Spirits are not gendered, bodies are. It just, it gets me so fired up. And I think it's good that it gets me fired up because it's helping me when I find this anger within me. It's burning away that fear of people telling me what they think and telling me that I'm wrong, telling me I'm going to hell, telling me all sorts of whatever. Because I know within me, I have done so much work. I journal, I pray, I meditate, I learn constantly. I look within myself constantly. I have done so much work on myself that these guys probably haven't done diddly squat. And they just hide behind a couple verses so that they can tell women what to do. So that is my journey. And as much as it can be frustrating, I do like that I can get up and say, I'm in the church, I'm an ordained pastor, I went to seminary, I have almost 19 years of experience in the parish, and I'm going to tell you this that you haven't heard before or that contradicts what you may have heard. And I'm slowly getting to the point where I'm just like, bring it on, idiots. You don't actually have any proof that you're right. You just have a couple Bible verses and a whole history behind you, but you've never had to think about it. You've never had to prove it. Women always have the burden of proof put on them. Well, you prove you have a right to be ordained. You prove you have a right to have a credit card. You prove it. No, dude, you prove it. You prove how being in the body that you were made makes you any better when we look around the world and see that animals are dying, the world is changing. You know, we have all our resources being mined. We have trauma all across the entire planet, genocide, wars happening. You prove that you deserve any leadership whatsoever. And how about you guys shut up and sit down for a change? There's my
Preach,
rant.
sister, preach. I love that. That was awesome. Okay, so that kind of brings me into the other thing that I wanted to talk about. First of all, that was beautifully put. And I do want to address this part. I actually did a little blurb on it a month or so ago. And that is spirituality and anger and politics and all that. Like, they don't mix. And I love my sisters on the spiritual path, but I do even see from them some judgment, like, we're just supposed to be love and light, no negativity, focus on what you want, don't. Makes me kind of nuts. Okay. And so, and I don't have a problem with them doing that because that's their part. That's their role in this. Great. If your role is to hold space and envision where we're going, good. But you're kind of falling into the religious trap where what I believe is what everyone should believe. What I'm doing is how everyone should be behaving. And that's not necessarily the case. We all are working out our different journeys on whatever this is we're on. And maybe for Siri and I, in our previous lifetime, we were quiet little mice who just followed the rules and didn't say a word. And maybe before we incarnated this time, we said, F that. This time I'm going to practice my power. I'm not going to be afraid anymore. I'm not going to let the history of what was done to women as they practice their magic and their miracles and their wisdom scare me into being quiet anymore. And this is why we need each other. because it's not supported in the general population. We have been very well trained in how women are supposed to behave. Men too, but we're not talking about that right now. But we've been very well trained. And women who step out of that line, history has proven, we're not kind to them. Maybe 100 years later, we're kind to them. But I mean, you look at even the suffragists, what they went through. I mean, they were jailed, they were force-fed, they were beaten. And what did everyone, imagine, this is over 100 years ago. We've only had the vote a little over 100 years. But people are like, how dare they? Oh, these women, you know, they're ruining everything. And that's what a lot of men say. We women, we're ruining everything because we're finding our voices. We're not going to be your cooks, your maids, your prostitutes, your child tenders anymore. We have more value than that. And the thing is, who was I talking to yesterday? I wish I could remember so I could give her proper credit. But she said, I like taking care of my family. I just don't like that it's expected of me to do it. And that's really good. Like I did too. I loved when my kids were at school and I would have cookies for them afterward, or I'd do something, plan something fun for them to do, or go on their field trips. I loved being a mother, but that wasn't all I needed to fulfill me. You know, I had to I didn't have a father for a long time. I've said, their dad died when they were pretty young, but I loved that part. But I'll tell you the truth. And I was married to a really wonderful man, great husband, great father. And the whole time I felt like a wolf chewing off his arm to get out of a trap. I had that panicky feeling. I was always camping down because I thought something's wrong with me. This should be, but it just wasn't. That's not me. And it's great if you're a woman that is fulfilling enough for, and you're lucky enough to have a spouse that can support both of you. But that doesn't mean there's a God in the sky that wants that. We have been trained to believe that. And you hit on that, and that's a thing that's been coming really clear to me in my meditations, Siri, is nobody knows. Nobody really knows. Even in the spiritual circles, people say, we're going through this great ship. Here's what's going to happen. Here's what's going to happen. Here's what you need. There's like a million different things. Same with religions. How many different religions? We believe this, we believe that. All they are is stories. I'm sorry, but the truth is all they are stories. People pick up the Bible. Siri and I have talked about this a million times. The Bible was put together by Constantine with an agenda during a very patriarchal time. There's even talk that maybe Jesus as an actual person didn't exist because there's so many Jesuses. Like each religion has almost a similar story about, a child being born and all that. Maybe it's a Christ consciousness that this person was trying to tell us about if Jesus existed. And there's nothing you can find, right, where he says, I am the chosen one. You must only follow me, worship me. Like none of that. He was trying to say, hey, look, I've discovered what makes life worth living, what our purpose is, who we truly are. We're actually gods. We're actually powerful. We're not supposed to be worshiping other people. We're not supposed to be judging other people. People were like, as time went on, wait a second, you mean people are going to have autonomy? They're going to have Christ consciousness. They're going to know their own power. People in charge don't want that. And this, I really believe this is this election. This is this election. Are we going to continue on this path of struggle and darkness? And there's a God in the sky, and we are just these little minions hoping maybe he'll be nice to us when we get to heaven, or maybe grant us a couple favors down here? Or are we going to actually ingest the teachings of Jesus and other great enlightened masters that said, ye are gods? Jesus said, greater things than I have done, you can do, because the power is in our belief, the power is in ourself. God is within us, right? I mean, these are all teachings that are taught over and over and over, but we don't really live those teachings. We live for some reason, and I shouldn't say for some reason, we know why. We've kind of adopted more to there's a God in the sky that's male, wants us to do this and not that. And I don't know, I'm kind of going off on tangents. So what would you like to say?
Well, reflecting on that, I do think it's really important to say that, you're right that Jesus did not ask for adoration and worship of himself, and he never said that he was anything particularly special. And someone's probably getting ready to type John, verses from the Gospel of John. But here's the thing about the Gospel of John is that anytime Jesus said, I am the word I am in Aramaic is it's I in nana. It's like the self, the part of me that's connected to God, the Christ consciousness is the way, the truth, and the life. That Jesus is embodying this wisdom that he's not the only one who has access to it. He was trying to give other people to access to it. He was trying to show them, help them plug in, so to speak. So his disciples were those people who were receptive, supposed to be the people receptive and open and spiritually mature enough to follow him, to learn how to plug more deeply in, to embody that Christ consciousness. In the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, that's exactly what he says, and is that Mary Magdalene is that person who figured out how to be the Ihidaya, the full human being, the one who embodies the Christ consciousness. And that was the point of Christianity. And in some ways, it makes sense when Jesus says the way is narrow, not because only a few people are going to heaven, but because not everybody's spiritually mature enough to be able to do that sort of harder inner work. Because it's about going in here. It's not about believing the right things so Sky Daddy loves you and takes you to heaven instead of throwing you to hell. But then the faith became simplified, and it became thrust into a construct of power and hierarchy, which it's not supposed to. It's like it's supposed to be turning all of that upside down, like Mary's Magnificat turns the power structures upside down. And here we are 2000 years later, and it's been such a long time that the only version of Christianity we have heard is the dominating hierarchical power, men who wrote the Bible, men who decided all the laws, men who have been priests and bishops and pastors for the last 1700 years, that basically we've all unilaterally been conditioned with a way of seeing the world, especially through a religious lens, that supports this patriarchy as being God-given and the only way it could ever be. And we don't even know what it feels like in that first 100 years of being Christian, those first few centuries before there was any power, before there was any hierarchy. There's a lot of evidence of much more an egalitarian way of life, with women as deacons, women as bishops, women as leaders. And that's not taught. It's evidence of it in the Bible, which is right there, is completely ignored. And we skim over it. Our eyes don't even see it. I mean, I went to seminary and have read through the Bible at least once. And it wasn't until I started writing a Women of the Bible study that I got to slow down and research and notice things I'd never noticed before, because we don't talk about the women. We skim over it. They're buried in unimportant little things. But the evidence of that early church following in the footsteps of Jesus, of actually being a lot more egalitarian than the culture was, is there. But we don't know that. Nobody teaches us that. So there is this shift happening, and I think that allowing ourselves to question things, especially, I'll put it this way, if it doesn't feel right in here, no matter what anyone says, no matter what the Bible says, no matter what your pastor says, no matter if they can point to this, theologian and this theologian, no matter what anyone says, if it doesn't feel quite right in here, you are allowed to question it. In fact, that is, I think, a holy thing to do, a sacred thing to do, because you're honoring the person that God made. So what God wants one of their children to be oppressed and the other one to get whatever they want, right? It doesn't make any sense. So as more and more people are calling the question, it is liberating some and scaring the crap out of others who either have a lot to lose, or simply, and I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt, it can be very triggering to some, both men and women, because it is like a house of cards. You start to pull on one card that says, oh, women can be pastors. Oh, maybe this Bible verse isn't this. oh, maybe Jesus was this. And all of these different beliefs that have been constructed to be on top of each other, it risks the whole thing falling. And that is terrifying for a lot of people. That's deconstruction. You're tearing down the walls of your reality. But anyone who's deconstructed on any level, like you have, like I've been doing and continuing to do, um, what's on the other side is freedom. And as I always say, every time I push myself into an area I'm not comfortable with, God is already waiting for me there. God is like, glad you could join me, right? I'm not running away from God. And that's what a lot of people want to believe, is that God can only be found in this little box. And otherwise, you're betraying God. You're turning your back on God. You're cheating on God. And I have found the opposite. I have found God under every rock and tree, and hiding in mosques and Hindu temples and Buddhist uh, meditation centers and pagan circles. I have found God almost everywhere I've looked.
I love that. That is so beautiful. You know what I was thinking when you were talking is Jesus was like the first feminist as a guy.
Yeah,
Jesus was a feminist. And I know a lot
yeah.
of people have an issue with that because, like anything that empowers women, we've turned it into a joke or something evil. But a feminist is someone who believes everyone should be treated equally, regardless of their gender. That's it. That's really it. That's it in a nutshell. But I think it's important, Siri, what you're saying. I want to be really honest here. I've been struggling. I absolutely believe there is a tremendous shift going on spiritually. The divine feminine is rising again, the feminine face of God, the Shekinah, whatever you want to call it. This is what I believe. And as you said, and I say all the time, prove me wrong. Can't prove me wrong. You can't prove yourself right. You could say, but the Bible. Okay, again, the Bible was written by men. And if we actually believe that the kingdom of heaven is within us and that God speaks to each of us and loves us all equally, why would what you're telling me have more influence in my life than what's coming from right inside of me? And this, I believe, this is where women
Yep.
are at. You
Yep.
look at Joan of Arc. She was burned at the stake. She was imprisoned. She was raped because she was listening to what was inside of her. Look at the Salem witch trials and all throughout history, the Crusades, the Inquisition, all this. Any woman who spoke her truth, who pulled up from inside of her, her magic, her miracles, her inner knowing, her wisdom, her intuition, was punished greatly for it. And I do believe there's a collective memory coming. I believe there's this beautiful rising of the divine feminine, and we're remembering, but it's scary because we're also remembering what happened to us last time, which is why we need each other, because this time we will not be silenced. This time we are going to use our magic, our miracles, our wisdom to help in healing this world. And I have been saying this for like 2 decades. Women are going to heal the world, but first they have to heal themselves. And I believe, and I didn't even really know what I was saying. I just started saying it, but boy, I believe it's true. And by healing ourselves, it's facing these things. It's not being demure and quiet. It's saying, back up. What did you say? What am I supposed to believe? No, that doesn't fit for me. You are not an authority over me. I am not going to follow those rules anymore. I am going to let what's inside of me come out because I have been ordained to say this, to do this, to practice this healing, to do whatever. And like I said, prove me wrong. You cannot prove me wrong. And especially the intuition. I've said this a million times. I don't think it's an accident. Their key phrase is fuck your feelings, because that's women. Women have things, which I think is hysterical given the
All the feelings they have.
this puddle of emotion and unhealed trauma that this person running for president for the GOP displays is just, I mean, all it is emotion. There's not even any logic in it. It's just emotion spewing all the time, but it's women who are emotional. But I wanted to say about that, this is why we need each other, because we need to say, I'm going through it too, sister. That's why you need a spiritual group. I have a spiritual group. In the last 2 days, I was telling you before we started the podcast, that we're reaching, are you exhausted? Are you exhausted? What's happening? So we can say, yeah, there's some kind of shift going on. We're doing it together. But I want to share this one thing that I thought was so awesome. I watched this documentary, and it was about this woman had a baby at 16 years old, raised her for 9 months, which is just, and then her mother made her give her away because she was like, you can't take care of her anymore. And obviously the mother was probably taking care of her. It was a different time, whatever, because she was maybe a little bit older than me. But so she gives this baby away because it's going to go to this wonderful home. Well, like 30 years later, she finds out this kid actually went to an abusive home.
Mm.
This woman got so angry, and she knew that man, and he had another daughter, and there were other, he had already been convicted of a rape and jailed for it for several years. It's an amazing story, but this is why I'm telling you this. This woman was so, she called him all the time. I know what you did. She would harass billboards. She was angry, and she said, I'm going to let this anger fuel me. And here's the amazing part that I really want all women to hear. From the beginning, she had like a detective. She was helping her figure all this stuff out. What happened to her daughter? Nobody knew. And as she's unraveling it, she's letting that fire lead her. And she said, my daughter is in his backyard. She is buried in that backyard. She's dead, and she's in his backyard. They even dug a couple places, the police, at one point after years and years, because this was not an overnight thing. Took many years. Nothing. No. Finally, when they finally got the evidence of another rape and murder he had committed, and were able to, because she kept harassing him, he went into the police station to complain about her, and they were able to get his DNA on a cup to finally put it with the DNA that was left at that crime 25 years ago. And guess where her daughter's body was?
Mm.
In the backyard, exactly where she had said years ago. She had no evidence, no proof, no nothing. It was her intuition, her gut instinct. This is our most valuable tool. This is what we have to reclaim as women. And you know what? If you want to make fun, women's woo, you go right ahead. You keep laughing. But we got business to attend to here. We're not putting this aside. We're not going to let you scare us into the sidelines. We're not going to let you take away our ability to make our own healthcare decisions so that you can enslave us in a home where we can be your prostitute and your child care person taking care of your children and cleaning your house. We're not doing that anymore. We're not going back. How about that? There you go.
Yeah.
Right into
Yeah. Yeah. I want to just say something about anger too, is that like, um, this isn't a proponent for like a toxic anger in which it turns you into a twist you up inside. The option is not between denying your anger and pretending you don't have it and smushing it down and then being drowned in your own anger. Every emotion has to move through you mindfully. Every emotion that comes to you, you greet it and you say, "Why are you here, my beloved? What are you here to teach me?" And my anger that has been buried deep inside on behalf of mostly what I've seen happen to other women. You know, I want to say I grew up in a very gentle, loving home. All of the men in my life are these gentle, non-toxic, like they're the perfect example of a masculine man to me, of just, you know, they can be both strong and gentle. They're thoughtful and feeling, and not perfect, but wonderful men. And the religion that I grew up with, the faith I grew up with, was very grace-filled and very God is love. It was when I started to get out in the world that I was like, oh, holy hell, what has been done to people? What has been taught to people? And one of my impetuses for going to seminary in the first place was to help people see that's not God at all. Um, the lies that people have been told about who God is and what the world is and what just no, absolutely not. And so the anger that we might feel for ourselves and for others, as long as the grief, as all of the emotions, the joy, everything that comes, we greet it as a teacher and we say, what are you here to teach it? And then when it can teach us its lesson, it moves up and out. It moves up and out, and that's a healthy progression. And while you were talking, Mary, I remember, tell me if you don't want me to say anything about this, but we did that rebirthing ceremony 2 years ago in Mount Shasta. at
Oh,
the
right. At the
mitzvah,
pool?
at the pool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll speak for myself. Like I thought every woman had a powerful experience that chose to go in there. Um, you go in 3 times to the pool, one to like get rid of what you want to die. I don't remember what the second was, but the third time is like, what are you taking on? And I remember I went in there, I wasn't really feeling anything particularly special. But then as I started moving towards the stairs, this thing was like, don't get out of the pool yet. Don't get out. And then all of a sudden I had this urge to start splashing and this unbelievable energy
Oh,
as
I
I just
remember
started
that. Yeah.
splashing like wings and just with huge waves that the priestess of the mitzvah had to get up and move because I was splashing the crap out of everybody. Um, I just felt this like feminine dragon energy moving through me, just this power, this raw power. It was so beautiful, but I love that voice. It was like, don't get out of the pool yet because you haven't gotten it yet. And just 3 seconds later, and it moved through me. Um, and I remember you were pretty badass too with what you did and said in that pool. And I just was like, and it was all different because it was who we were and what we needed. And that was the divine moving with and through us in that moment. Um, it was beautiful.
That it was. I'm glad you brought that up. That was quite an experience. And we all decided to do it naked, which was really
Oh,
important
yeah,
for women because we were all different ages, all different sizes. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to be ashamed of my body. This is who I am.
exactly.
This is what I look like. I've had surgery. I've had kids. And I'm tired of rejecting my body. So that was huge because we didn't know each other before that retreat. It's not like we were like BFFs forever or anything. We had just met. So that I love when women get the power of women together, which is probably
Yep.
why they, want to keep us fighting. All the shows geared toward us, all the reality shows, fight, 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 fight. Because when you keep women fighting, then they're not remembering their power and how much power they have, even more so when they are connected to each other. And that I'm very appreciative that you brought that up about anger because it's a delicate dance for women because we're so trained that we're really unattractive when we're angry. And there is a difference. I have known angry women that just spill it all over everyone every day. Because that's not what we're talking about. There's a quote. I wish I could remember who said it. It was a woman because I know I've used it on my daily inspirations, but she said, grab the broom of anger and drive off the fear. And if
Mm,
you gotta choose, we're gonna choose anger for a while and we're gonna get it wrong sometimes. We're not gonna respond properly. But
yes.
even if we lose it, I say give yourself credit for not being that timid little mouse anymore who doesn't want to make waves and just everybody loves because she's so sweet and she'll just do anything for anybody and she never thinks of herself. Eh, God,
Right.
yeah, but that's what we're held up as the ideal women, which is convenient for everybody but us.
Yep.
It doesn't work out so well for us. It works out really well for everyone in our life. I do want to say this one thing. I wanted to read this because this is what I believe is happening. Take it or leave it. Can't prove me wrong. I can't prove you wrong. So that's what I always say when we're talking about these spiritual things. Tradition does not make truth either. Just because things have always been a certain way, it doesn't mean that that's the truth. But I do believe the divine feminine is rising. I do believe women are remembering who we are, the innate power within us. And I do believe that we have a very pivotal role to play in this, but we have got to heal ourselves first. And we do that by remembering. I'm tired. Terry, you said this too. Women are tired because there's a lot of shifts going on, aside from all the stuff we do in our lives internally and psychologically and spiritually. There's so much. So let's be really gentle with ourselves. And when we need to rest, let's rest. But I want to read this. It is a little post I saw by Bridget Anna McNeil. This is what she said. Isn't it odd that once upon a time, a woman could be killed for making potions from the plants around her? Isn't it insane that once upon a time, wise women were burnt or drowned for helping birth babies, knowing their herbs, gathering in groups of more than two, being outside alone, being strong, being beautiful, being ugly, being different, being sexual, being non-sexual, or touching a nettle, smelling a rose, or drinking wild teas? Isn't it madness that a woman who knew her body, her mind, and her heart was cast aside as evil, as a sinner, and her life taken away. Women, do not let the ancestral memory of this that is held in your makeup, in your bones and blood, hold you back. Rise, dear sweet sisters. Rise so that our daughters and daughters' daughters don't have to wonder when we lost our tongues and denied our hearts. Grow a new tongue. Invite the wolf in. Awaken the witch and dance under the moon. Embrace your heart, your womb, your gut, and your wisdom. I just love that. I just love it because
Yep.
it's break free of everything that you're told you're supposed to be.
Mhm.
I think it's the most beautiful thing. And we need each other because guilt's going to come up because we are programmed with guilt whenever we step out of the line to feel guilty, like we're doing something wrong or bad. People in our lives will not like it. They do not like when you say, I don't want to play this role anymore. They're like, hey, you need to get back in that role. That made me feel secure and comfortable, made my life easier. So anyway, any closing thoughts for you, Siri?
Oh, what you just said reminds me of one of my absolute favorite stories where uh, Jesus is visiting Mary and Martha, two sisters, and Martha's in the kitchen and she's getting all pissed off and she's like, Jesus, make my sister Mary get in the kitchen with me and stop sitting with the male disciples and learning at your feet. And Jesus is like, I'm not going to do that. He will not defend patriarchal roles. He defends Mary doing whatever the hell she wants because he sees in her somebody who is thirsting, even though that was only what men were supposed to do. And so, like, exactly what you said almost sounded like a quote from, like, make her get back in here. And Jesus says, no.
I love that. I love that. So in closing, look, we don't have the answers for anybody except ourselves. I do believe that. Siri has a beautiful wisdom and opinions. I have wisdom and opinions. This is what we believe. We're finding our way. We're sharing it. I do this because, like I've said this many times, this happened to me, this shift 25 years ago or so, and it was very scary. And it still is scary sometimes, a lot of times, because there's no roadmap for this. How does a woman find her way back to her own soul? Well, there's no roadmaps for that. We can talk to each other and say, hey, this helped me. This helped me. We inspire each other. We don't instruct because you don't have my instructions. I don't have your instructions. But if we just kind of stay connected to each other and say, it's a rough path. I know it's scary, but we're breaking free. We're doing this. We're going to do it together. And we're more powerful than we ever even imagined.
Mhm.
And that's, I kind of hate saying those kind of things because people say that all the times and it sounds so woo-woo, but I really do believe that. I really do believe we haven't begun to tap into our power.
Mhm.
We can only do that when we step out of the roles that we've been assigned and start going inside ourselves and asking, who am I? And what do I really believe outside of what I've been trained to believe?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, Siri, once again, thank you so much for your wisdom, your heart, your spirit, and your conversation. And we look forward to seeing you again next time.
Thank you very much. Yep.
Thank you.